If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's like the easiest way to make a podcast ever. Okay, let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you find podcasts. And you can make money, and there's no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in like one place. Okay, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started right now. Anchor.fm and get started right now and start your own podcast just like me. It's so easy. You're listening to Out of the Box with Rosie Tran. If you guys enjoy us on iTunes and Stitcher, please rate and always leave reviews. It helps us out a lot. We're here today with New York Times bestselling author and now running for Congress, Marianne Williamson. Marianne, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you, Rosie?
I am great. I am so excited to have you because I'm a fellow transformational person and I'm excited about your bid for Congress.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I wanted to know what made you decide to run, in the first place, because, you're traditionally a best-selling author and also in the transformational arena. And I actually have seen you at a couple political events that are kind of political spiritual love mob, which is in Los Angeles. But I'm curious to know what made you decide to run for Congress.
President Eisenhower said that politics should be the part-time profession of every American. You have a radio show, you do what you do, I write books, I do what I do. Another person is a doctor, another person is an artist, another person is a teacher, another person is a businessman. But there's one part-time profession that we all share, or that we should all share, and that is our participation in the stewardship of American democracy. And I feel that there's been a little bit of a lockout. As a matter of fact, I don't think there's been a little bit of a lockout. I think there's been a very serious lockout by which the average citizen has now less influence, less of a say, and less involvement in the functioning of our government than we've had in a very long time. I also think, though, that even though this lockout has been created by the political status quo, both in terms of the dominance of two political parties and also even more so the dominance of money, I think that we have also in some ways conspired with a lockout by becoming disengaged, by becoming distracted, and so forth.
Well, I think a lot of people actually agree with you and don't agree with the two-party system. I know I totally disagree with it, but they feel trapped because there's only two major parties in this country.
Exactly. Well, as I'm sure you know, I'm running as an independent, and what I was going to say was that for me, when you were asking me why I decided to do this, it was because I felt that this situation will not change unless we, the people, make that change, much because of what you were just saying. If you have a dominance of two political parties, it's ridiculous to think that you can ask the status quo to change a situation that they created. Mm-hmm. So I feel that it's voices like mine, like yours, which really is aligned with the founders' vision, particularly in the House of Representatives, which was to be the house of what's happening now. So if there's going to be a pattern interruption, a real reclaiming of democracy, so that the average American does not feel trapped, so that the average American does not feel locked out, then that pattern interruption will not be created by the status quo. It will be created by the people. And I felt a calling in my heart, as I think a lot of us feel a calling in our hearts, to do what we can to be part of that shift.
So what does that shift look like to you? What is your vision for, say you get elected tomorrow and, you're in your office, what are some of the major issues that you're going to say, all right, I'm taking this on, no holds barred?
Well, I believe that there's one issue that underlies all the others in terms of its importance, because in terms of its fundamental toxicity, and that is the undue influence of money on our political system. We have developed over the last few decades a legalized system of corruption. where moneyed forces have such a disproportionate influence, wield such disproportionate power on the functioning of our government compared to the average American.
Now, are you talking about donations? Are you talking about lobbying, or both? Or
well, definitely that includes lobbying, but most particularly the money, since Citizens United specifically, that can now be given on an unlimited and anonymous basis to advertising campaigns to either support or defeat issues related to specific candidates. Now, we also have the way banking policies, trade policies, taxation policies have led to this horrifying way in which the bulk of the public purse in terms of our material resources as a nation now go into the hands of a very few Americans. So for me, anything that contributes to the perpetuation of that unfair system is something I would be interested in. However, until we deal with that underlying issue of getting money out of politics, then nothing will fundamentally change. And that's why the conversation both in Congress as well as out of Congress, leading up to the establishment of a constitutional amendment, which would declare it unconstitutional for money to have undue influence on our political system. That is the conversation that I would give most of my passion to, most of my interest to. I think the economic injustice of our time, leading to the income inequality, leading to child poverty, and all of the attendant issues that come from the fact that money is allowed to speak more than people, whether it has to do with climate change, the corruption of our food supply, our mass incarceration rate. I'm interested in all the derivative problems, but I realize that that underlying issue is getting the money out of politics, and I would work in any way possible with whatever power afforded me to be part of the change in that area.
Do you think because you're going against the system, because basically what's going on right now is, like you said, a lot of politicians are bought, a lot of politicians, even politicians that I initially supported, I've seen them corrupted over time very quickly. And are you scared about going against the current political system? I mean, these are, it's kind of an old boys club right now. They're not all necessarily boys, but you know, you get my drift.
Well, I believe that millions of people feel this way, feel the way you feel the way I feel. And what we need is, I believe, more independent candidacies, not just mine.
No, I totally agree. And I think California has a little bit more diversity, and I think it starts here. We're paving the way for the rest of the country in a lot of political arenas, especially the environment right now.
I totally agree. And the fact that we have the open primary, the fact that we have the depoliticized gerrymandering, those progressive policies that even allowed me to be able to run. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to.
So you want to completely change the system. That's your goal.
Well, I mean, that sounds a little grandiose, my personal goal to change the system. No, it's not like that. I would like to submit to the people of District 33 in California for their consideration a representative in Washington who would, on their behalf, work very hard on this issue. And those who agree with me that that is the main corrupting influence, who would like to see that change, I hope that they will vote for me. I hope that they will vote for me at the June 3rd primary. And I hope that they will, if I'm fortunate enough to win the primary, vote for me in the midterm elections. And they would know that I would, to the best of my ability, work with people both in Congress as well as outside of Congress at whatever level given me to magnify that conversation and work on that issue so that that very, very fundamental course correction can be made. A course correction without which, I believe, we will continue to see the fundamental dismantling of American democracy. Our government of the people, by the people, and for the people has already become a government of a few of the people, and by a few of the people, and for a few of the people. Until we get the money out and the people back in, we will continue to see the death spiral of American democracy.
So it sounds like you really believe in democracy and you're really passionate about representing people's voices and people that are not being represented in Washington. Is that what I'm hearing?
You know why? Because in a democracy, everybody should have an equal voice. That's what a representative democracy is intended to be. And I'm not saying that we've ever perfected that in the United States, but I also don't think we've ever lived at a time where there is such a pattern of tearing the whole thing down in this continuous dismantling that goes on without an uprising among the people to stop it, because it's insidious. It's not, if you look at something like abolition, well, it's obvious that slavery is not democratic. If you look at something like women's suffrage, it's obvious that not giving women the right to vote is undemocratic. If you look at for many of us, we believe that if you do not allow gay people to marry, you see a lot of things where it's obvious because there's an externalized form of an undemocratic impulse. What's happening now, though, is kind of a death by 1,000 cuts. It's NSA spying here. It's Trans-Pacific Partnership there. It's Guantanamo Bay over there. It's it's National Defense Authorization Act over here. It's limiting voting rights over there. It's just these accumulated situations that make all of us go, you got to be kidding me. And then coming to the realization that the institutional corners that we've always expected to protect us from such egregious transgressions against our Constitution are, if not the direct perpetrators, way too often in cahoots with the perpetrators. And once again, if there's going to be an intervention, if there's going to be a pattern interruption, that's going to come from the people. It is not going to come from the political status quo.
I definitely feel your energy. I think a lot of people are in line with what you're saying right now, just because so many people feel like they're being controlled by the government, watched, controlled, and they have no voice. It just seems like people don't have the same representation that they did years ago, and the government seems to be, more and more corrupt. Now, what would you say? I hear your passion, and I definitely believe in your cause, but what would you say to someone that said, who are you to run? You don't have any political background. You've never been a mayor or a representative or anything. What would you say to someone, that's going to be a naysayer? Because it sounds like, I've heard many people run for different positions before with great points of view, but then they get muffled out by negative media or other avenues trying to silence them.
Well, a couple of things. The first thing I would say to the people who would say, who are you to do this, is I would refer them to the U.S. Constitution. The founders did not say that in order to run for Congress, you had to have been a mayor. They did not even say that to run for the Senate, you had to have been a congressman. They didn't even say that in order to run for president, that you have to be anything other than 35 years of age, have lived here for 14 years, and born here. And that's a very important point, because if the founders had wanted to say you had to be governor, you had to have been a senator, if they had wanted to name those qualifications, they couldn't. They would have. And they didn't, because they wanted to leave it to every generation to determine for itself the skill set that they felt was adequate to dealing with the challenges of their time. This political class has come up with this conceit that those are the things that make one qualified. I would say someone being a parent makes them qualified. Someone being an artist makes them qualified. Someone being a philosopher makes them qualified. Someone being a scientist makes them qualified, particularly in the House of Representatives. The founders intended the House of Representatives to be the house of what's happening now. That's why it's every 2 years. They thought a farmer would come serve for a few years. They thought that, the pot maker would come serve for a few years. So this is all just a conceit created by this political class. The political class itself having turned politics into a spectator sport. And one of the things that it has done to obfuscate is to suggest that any of us who have not played in their particular field is not qualified to run for office. That's exactly the kind of thing that we need to stand up and put the lie to, because it is a lie.
Are you concerned about any possible negative ads or anything against you?
Of course I am. I mean, they're going to be there. I'm not naive. I see already things like New Age guru running for office. Well, they slap New Age label on you, like, automatic suggestion that you're not a serious thinker, you're some woo-woo person, and I love that. Somebody said to me the other day, "You're the New Age candidate." I said, "What's the implication here? That the old age has handled this well?" I mean,
I like the label New Age. I think it sounds very positive because it's like, hey, you're taking on a new time, new era, out with the old, in with the new. I love it. I think it's positive.
All right, I'll take that from you. But
I hear that a lot. People say, oh, that's this new age hippie stuff, or they don't take it serious, or it's pseudoscience. I hear that one a lot. People take a lot of transformational thinking and say it's a pseudoscience. It's not provable. It's not real. It's they kind of use it as a discrediting language. And no, I have no negative connotations with New Age, and I get what's trying to be done. It's to discredit you, basically.
Right. And so when you say, will they be doing that? Yeah, they'll be doing that.
So you've already heard attack ads or attack comments about your running?
Well, it's very early in the campaign. And once again, I'm not naive. They save their big guns for later. And so far, it's just the soft New Age, it's politics. They'll do what they do. But what are we going to do? Just not stand up at this time in history? Because they're going to embarrass me, because they're going to humiliate me, because they're going to say lies about me, because they're going to do ugly pictures. I mean, I don't want to live the rest of my life knowing that I didn't live what felt to me like the song in my heart and the fullness of my own gifts because I was afraid they would be mean to me. I mean, that goes against everything I've written, everything I've taught, everything I've stood for.
So what are some of the other issues? The main issue is definitely a huge one. What are some of the other issues that you're aiming towards in your views? Just because, you're new to the political spectrum as far as the mainstream is concerned. So, what can people expect from Marianne Williamson?
We have, obviously, climate change is an issue. We have a clear and present danger on our hands. And yet still, because of the undue influence of money, we're letting the oil companies, all fossil fuel companies, run our environmental policies, possibly to the peril of the survival of the human race. America has the second highest child poverty rate in the world, second only to Romania. We have 1 in 5 American children who go to sleep at night food insecure. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world, higher than Iran, higher than Russia, higher than China. We incarcerate 2.4 million people in this country.
It's big business. It's big business. Privatized prisons is big business. Complex. Yes. So, a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, and well, they're going to know it if I have anything to do with it, because so much of this campaign is dedicated to that communication. 500,000 of those are nonviolent drug offenders. We should give some very serious thought to even ending the drug war. We need to change the issue of drugs from a criminal justice issue to a public health issue. And the corruption of our food supply, what the chemical companies and Monsanto and big agriculture, they're literally fundamentally altering our food chain. Once again, only because with their money they can. So if we don't stand up to this, what you're seeing in America today is that we have subconsciously recreated an aristocracy. We have subconsciously recreated a situation, whether you call it oligarchy, plutocracy, corporatocracy, whatever we want to call it. The point is that we have allowed our social and economic policies to foster a situation in which a relatively few Americans get to take whatever they want, and then whatever's left, whatever crumbs are left on the floor after that, two major political parties try to argue that they can give us the bigger pile of crumbs.
What I'm not understanding is people, regardless of political orientation, that deny climate change, that deny the agricultural issues, because we all suffer from it. It's not that actually is not a class issue at all, especially climate change.
It is so true. It's actually very sad. We have average Americans who are Democrats battling with average Americans who are Republicans. Not enough people realizing that if anybody should be on the same side, it's just at the average American, period.
I think in general, some of these social issues are used to pit people against each other so that they can't see the real issues.
Exactly. And like when you were talking about the issue of mass incarceration and you said you think people don't know, I think that's true with the food issue a lot also. I think a lot of Americans do not realize the level of the corruption of our food supply. And anybody who wants to know it, knows about climate change. The majority of Americans realize that climate change is a clear and present danger. The problem is not that American people don't know it. The problem is that what the American people think and feel comes second in terms of the actual ability to wield political influence to moneyed forces, whether it's the NRA or the oil companies.
Well, that's true. There's a lot of misinformation. I know with the issue with GMOs, almost everyone I knew and most of the people I spoke to and also political surveys said most people were against it, yet the GMO labeling was defeated because of the heavy advertising in rural and uneducated areas.
Yes, many millions of dollars went into it.
Even though it affects everyone and mostly uneducated and, people are suffering from this because they don't have the money to go, buy organic or get, better food supply because a lot of it's really sad.
They're
it's
scared
bad.
by that advertising into thinking that their food bills would go up. It was a complete canard.
Yes. So climate change, you talked about prisons. What are you proposing to help the prison system, especially in Los Angeles, where our prisons are overcrowded and people are really suffering and getting arrested? And it's actually scary because I know people that are real criminals. They're, reformed, thankfully, who actually did not do their full time and got out early because the prisons are so overcrowded. And the system of releasing prisoners is arbitrary. It's not based on your crime. It's actually sometimes based on race or other things like that.
Well, obviously, I think we would all agree that there are certain people who belong behind bars. And people who belong behind bars should be behind bars. But I think what many of us are realizing is how many people are in prison in the United States who would not be reasonably seen as deserving of particularly these long draconian sentences that came about because of mandatory sentencing, because of 3 strikes, you're out, laws, and so forth. There's already a movement to take a serious new look at this. Some of the people who are in prison for years and years and years for particularly some of these nonviolent drug crimes. So, there are many issues here having to do with the 3 strikes, having to do with the cocaine versus regular cocaine sentences, having to do with changing from criminal justice to public health policy. I believe.
And when you mean public health, you mean mental health? Is that what you?
No, not mental health. Public health in terms of there are many countries who, instead of treating drug addiction as a criminal issue, treat it as a public health issue and make more and more avenues of recovery available. We have a drug czar. We could have a sobriety czar.
Mm-hmm. Got it. I thought you were referring to mental health because I know that a lot of prisoners suffer from mental health issues and they're committing crimes because they're frustrated and uneducated. A lot of our criminals.
That's certainly true. But once again, anytime you have large groups of desperate people, whether it's a corner of your city or a corner of your world, they are a societal risk. They are a national security risk. And if you are going to allow large groups of desperate people, desperate because there's no economic opportunity, desperate because there's no educational opportunity, desperate because there's no social opportunity, those groups become a petri dish out of which it is almost reasonable to assume that group pathology will result. Now, what are you going to do? Just keep building more prisons or keep dropping more bombs? That's absurd. We have to shift from an allopathic to a holistic model where we realize that you deal with these issues on the level of cause, not just on the level of effect. And if you only deal with these issues on the level of effect, then what you do is you make a profit center out of huge amounts of unnecessary human suffering. And that's immoral. That's sociopathic.
So what does a holistic approach look like to you for someone who maybe, doesn't understand that system because they're used to the way things are right now?
Okay, let's take, for example, universal preschool. Now, a person in America who can afford it, who has a little child, sends their child, their son or daughter, to preschool. An American family who cannot afford it is less likely to send their child to preschool. The child who does not go to preschool enters kindergarten behind on day one. So first of all, think about that childhood trauma. First day of school, but you're already behind because there's these other little boys and girls who are starting to read. Now, we have 2 years to catch that child up in their reading skills. If we have not caught that child up by the second grade, they are then statistically in the second grade on a 50% statistical probability track to incarceration.
Wow.
If we do not catch that child up within another 2 years, by the fourth grade, if that child is not yet reading, we can see a correlation between how many American children cannot read in the fourth grade and how many prison beds will one day be needed.
So you're saying let's start at the core, not just fix the problem after it's already become a problem.
And that's what a holistic model is all about. You know, for an African American man living in the United States today, every African American man statistically has a 1 in 3 lifetime probability of incarceration.
Because they're not getting the head start. That's your point.
And there are many other, race-related issues in incarceration. All I'm saying is that this is a total moral scourge on our nation. And each and every one of us should consider it a matter of our own conscience as stewards of American democracy. You know, American democracy, our country, was born of a dichotomy between forces of enlightenment and enlightened policies and forces which were anything but. And often with our founders, they lived in the same person. But throughout the narrative of American history, there has always been this contest between those who wanted to embody more fully the enlightened principles on which we purport to stand, and those who would withdraw the resources of the nation from the process of that manifestation, that embodiment. And in other generations, there had been those, the abolitionists, civil rights participants, women's suffrage, and so forth. There have been generations which saw the swerve and yet made sure that the self-correction that needed to occur, the course correction that needed to occur, then occurred. And we're not the first generation, on whose watch there's been this terrible swerve away from our ethical center. And I hope that we will, like generations before us, do what is necessary now to wage a course correction.
What are your stances on, you said, obviously Monsanto, GMOs, you're against that. So what are you proposing to do at home to get food labels, to get, big chemical companies out of our food supply?
Once again, the underlying cancer is dealing with the money in politics. As long as the chemical companies and the big agriculture companies and the NRA, all of it, as long as those kinds of multinational corporate interests and also individuals or union, as long as that much money can be brought to bear on the political process, then the American people will always be playing defense. We're always playing defense, always fighting off the oil companies, all fighting off the Monsanto, fighting off the chemical companies. We've got to get out of that perpetual mode, and we've got to turn back to a serious pursuit of democracy, in which case the government, instead of advocating on behalf of the interests that actually are encroaching on the rights of the American people, are actually once again advocating for the rights of the common good and the average American. Our government, like I said, it's a legalized system of corruption by which we can no longer look to the government to protect us. Far too often, the government is the perpetrator.
Now, I want to ask you about education, because you're talking about this holistic approach. Let's start where the problems begin. And I think a lot of problems with unemployment and crime and other things that you're talking about stem back to education. And I have many, many, many friends who are teachers in LAUSD and all across the country, public school teachers, who are saying that they can't teach what they want. They can't teach critical thinking. They can't teach reading skills. They can't teach common sense, because they're being forced these standardized tests that are trying to measure intelligence. What do you think about
this?
I
agree with you. I'm not for the high stakes standard testing. I think I agree with you, and I agree with your friends. I think it's taken the creativity, it's taken the art of teaching away from people, it's taken the creativity away from the classroom, and I agree with your friends. I'm not for the high stakes testing.
There's also major problems in LAUSD right now in general with just, there's not enough money. It just seems to be that, like you said, the underlying cancer, all this money is going to these corporatized issues, yet basic education for, kids is not being dealt with. Is it a restructuring of where the money's going, or what is going to solve this problem? Because it just keeps getting worse and worse, it seems.
Well, I think what's going to solve the problem more than anything else is more people getting involved in the solution. There are many creative answers, but it's just one more area where it's an all hands on deck type of moment. And all people must enter in at the level where they can be of the most value. For me, the place where I feel that I can contribute the most is a conversation around preschool and also a conversation around free college.
Why do you free college? We'll go to that in a second. But why this emphasis on preschool? It seems like you're very passionate about starting super early.
Well, because of what I said earlier about what happens to a child who doesn't go to preschool. And how if they don't learn to read by the second grade, they're on a 50% track for incarceration. If they don't read by the fourth grade, then there's a bed waiting for them. That's why. To me, that's a moral horror. So
you're saying let's just get in early, spend the money there, and save, lives.
Exactly.
Literally. Literally, let's save lives and let's save some money.
What an outrageous thought, huh?
It's like taking care of yourself instead of, having the diabetes and the heart disease and everything,
the
later.
Shift from an allopathic to a holistic model. We've already done it in medicine, and it's time to do it in politics.
Okay. Free college. Number one burden right now, is student loan debt. People are underwater, totally underwater. They're turning into what I call indentured servants. Because people are leaving, kids are leaving with $50,000 to $200,000 in debt for a normal professional degree.
And many of them have decided, what the hell? Why even try? Not even going to school. It's terrible. Also, the United States should have the most fantastic matrix of technical schools, because what we call higher education, there are other forms of it than just a liberal arts education. Oregon is dealing with an effort at free college. If we really want to stimulate our economy, just like in the body, enough blood has to circulate in order for the body to be healthy. In a society, in order for the society to be healthy, enough access to opportunity, enough access to capital, enough access to education has to circulate. Right now, it's a very paternalistic model. Politicians falling over themselves, saying when these kids get out of school, we need to have jobs for them. I don't look at it that way. The way I look at it, every child in America is a potential genius. And if we do right by them, they'll get out of school and start their own $6 million company.
Yes, they'll start creating the jobs themselves.
Exactly. They should be the job creators. Thank you.
That's great. So what is your idea or proposition for free college? Because the American college system sounds very similar to the prison system, sadly, where it's this for-profit. I know a lot of people who are working in college budgeting boards, and the way the budgets work in a lot of private colleges and public colleges is that they get a certain budget, and if they don't spend that budget or max it out as much as possible, they won't get the funding next year. So their job is to spend as much money as possible, therefore increasing the cost of higher education, therefore increasing the debt levels and everything like that. And it just is kind of like this system where money is being wasted on purpose so that they don't lose their budgets.
Well, one plan that has been put forward has to do with the idea of anybody who proves that they can stay, and this wouldn't be to Princeton or Harvard, it would be to a good state school, and anybody who proves that they can make, let's say, a B minus, stay within a B minus or above average, would have their education paid for, and then would pay 2% of their income for 10 years. They would pay it back.
Oh, that is a very good plan. I never thought of something like that. I just wanted to say, though, that I'm only 29. I'm not that, it's not like I'm like 70 or 80 years old. And when I moved to California, we actually had one of the best public college systems in the country. And as I was here, it progressively got worse and worse and worse with the budget deficits. I mean, the budget just, getting overspent and California just not being able to balance its budget in general. And I noticed that that's been an issue in the past few years, is that many cities, states, municipalities in general haven't been able to balance a budget. It's been such a point of contention. We've had the debt ceiling. We've had other budget issues. What is the solution to this?
Well,
in your eyes,
as you were saying, California, the public education, public college, university system of California used to be a crown jewel of this state and a model for the nation. And, these breakdowns do not occur mysteriously. There are specific policies and specific actions that are taken, which dismantle these situations. And several decades ago, there were people in power. We had governors and such who did not think that supporting the University of California educational system was the highest priority. And so we got what we got.
Do you think that a lot of, once you're elected to Congress, do you think that a lot of your efforts will actually be cleaning up the mess of other Congress people before you and other political people before you? Because it seems like there's a lot to clean up.
Well, I'm not naive, and voters shouldn't be naive either. I'm not going, if I win, I don't go to Washington with a magic wand. I don't have any kind of grandiose vision that I'm there to clean up the mess of other Congress people. But I will be there to represent not only the interests of my constituents, but also the consciousness of my constituents. And I believe that conviction is a force multiplier. And if I win this race, it will be because of people who share my conviction that America must move in another direction, that America must repudiate the current political status quo, which only perpetuates an unsustainable pattern by which the health and well-being of the American people are being placed second to financial interests of a small sector of our society. And I believe that with conviction. If I win, given that I am an independent, given that I am not the institutionally backed candidate, if I win, it will because a lot of people who share that conviction with me talk to their friends, share my website, marianneforcongress.com, show up with their friends at my events, get people to register and get people to vote. And if the conviction comes together in such a way as to give me a win in this race, you better believe I will take that conviction with me. I will realize what an honor it is. I will realize that something really major happened here, and I will not forget it one day that I'm there. And I will do everything I can in whatever way is afforded me to stand for the issues that I'm talking about now.
Okay, I just want to bring up one more topic before we wrap up. I noticed that in political races, a lot of times religion is brought up. I know a lot of Americans had issues with Mitt Romney being Mormon.
Yep.
And there's, have been issues of the past, Kennedy being Catholic and other things. And you are sort of like you said, have been labeled New Age, spiritual, whatever. Do you think that's going to affect your candidacy? And if so, what would you say about your spirituality or religion to other people that, because a lot of people don't understand that. There's many people who are just traditional Catholic or traditional Baptist, and they just know their religion. And so when they hear that label or see that label associated with someone, they're super scared off and, just don't want anything to do with it or don't understand it.
Well, first of all, remember where I'm running. I'm running in
You are running in Los Angeles. I'm just saying there are
everybody in this district who has a yoga mat votes for me. So that's number one. Like, hello, remember where I'm running. And also, I've always been very open. People know that I'm Jewish, and the current congressperson is Jewish, and I don't think in District 33 the other issue is a problem. I think it will be an effort on the part of others running for this race, for this position. We'll try to make it an issue. And I would think that they'll do it with this kind of like suggestion that I'm not a serious thinker, This is a very serious time in America, and we only need serious thinkers, which once again, if what we've got in America today is the product of their serious thinking, God help us.
So it's not an issue for you if anyone asks It's
Rosie, I'll tell you something. I came into this. I thought long and hard about whether or not to do this. It was not.
It's a big decision.
And I didn't make it. I didn't. Make it impulsively. There are going to be some ugly moments. I am aware of that. But I think as an American woman, we need to raise the bar on what we consider brutal. Brutal is living under the Taliban. Brutal is living in a place where, your fiance can throw acid in your face with impunity, or your family can kill you for having been raped with impunity. I mean, come on, let's be real. And I feel that women, hopefully, such as yourself, who are not as willing as we used to be to stand by, while other women are demonized in a very sexist way. I think we've all been through enough now. Sometimes it's not what people say about you. It's whether or not other people then respond and say, stop right there, or that's unfair, or I know different. And I know that will make all the difference.
That is a great point. I think that we do need more women representatives in general, because if you truly are representing your constituents, our government should look a lot different than it does now, ethnically and, sex-wise. Right. It tends to be mostly white males. Obviously, the makeup has changed a little bit in the past few years, but not much. If you look up, in Washington, it's very generic.
Yeah, we have 20% of our Congress people in the House of Representatives are women.
Oh, that's sad. Because definitely 20% of the population is not women. There's a lot more of us around than that. So it's not a true representation.
Yes, I hope you'll help me change that.
I will. So where can people find out more about you? Where are you speaking in the next few months? Do you have anything else, to let listeners know about?
People can find out more at marianneforcongress.com or Marianne Williamson for Congress.com, either one, marianneforcongress.com. You'll see when you open up that page, you'll see a splash video with a video about my announcement. You might want to look at that, Rosie. My next public talk will be in Redondo Beach on December 11th. And you can see that there. I will be speaking in Redondo Beach on the evening of December 11th.
Now, are you doing any live streaming or anything where people can see online if they can't make it?
I have not yet, but perhaps I should start to do that. Maybe closer to the campaign, I will. And the volunteer nights, we will not be doing this on Thanksgiving, but other than that, every Thursday night in Venice at 305 Rose Avenue at a place called The Source. And all of that is written on the website. I hope people who resonate with these ideas will donate in whatever way is right for them, even if it's $5 a month. Every bit adds up. And people can have house parties. All kinds of stuff is going on. And if people go to marianneforcongress.com, they'll see what I mean. And I hope they'll join in the campaign, because I think that this is it's a collective act of love and possibility. And I think that cynicism is just an excuse for not helping.
That is true. There is a phrase, if you're upset with politics, change it by volunteering.
That's right. I mean, how can we complain that there's not higher consciousness in politics when we're not putting it there?
Exactly. Well, everyone, that's Marianne Williamson. She's running for Congress in Southern California, and you can check her out. Also, check us out at outoftheboxpodcast.com, and also click donate if you enjoyed us. And I've been Rosie Tran. Thank you.